She walks into my life after dark and disappears before the world wakes up. I rent a tiny one-bedroom apartment in a quiet coastal town just outside San Francisco. I work from home doing overnight tech support for a major software company I'm not allowed to name. Most of my calls come from system admins in Europe or Australia, people who get locked out of their accounts or freak out when syncs fail. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills. Anyway, I'm Nate. I've been an insomniac since high school, so I'm used to being awake at weird hours. I talk to people all night long, but almost never about anything real, just server errors and login failures. Sometimes I cook ramen at 2 AM, other times I leave old documentaries running just for noise. Once I spent an hour listening to police scanner traffic, just background chatter from dispatch, DUI calls, noise complaints, domestic violence and missing persons. It at least reminded me the world hadn't stopped. So when I met Leah, it felt overdue, like something I didn't realise I'd been starving for. Not since Brooke moved out anyway. We met in February on an insomnia support forum. Someone had posted a thread titled, "Anyone else feel like time changes after midnight?" I replied when she replied to me. Her username was midnight_sister. Over the next several days we messaged back and forth in DMs. At first it wasn't flirty or anything like that. We mostly just shared quiet stories about sleepless nights, our favourite movies, philosophical conversations. Even Schrodinger's cat wound up in one of those late night talks. It was clear we were hitting it off. Instantly I was drawn to her. It felt like she saw through me without needing to say a word. And a week later she asked if I wanted to video chat. I agreed. Instead of using my usual platforms like Zoom, she sent me a link to a private video room I'd never heard of before. It was completely stripped down, there was no logo, no login or any kind of branding at all, and the page only worked after midnight. That struck me as a little weird, so out of curiosity I tested it during the day. It threw a 404 error and wouldn't load at all. It didn't feel like a real app, it felt like a leftover, something abandoned online, waiting for someone to click the wrong link. The first time I saw her on camera, my jaw nearly hit the floor. Honestly, I just stared. Leah had this look I couldn't quite explain, black hair that caught the light just right, giving it copper streaks. Her eyes were a pale grey-green, which drew you in. I noticed a tiny scar on her upper lip and made her smile feel oddly real. She told me she was 26 and used to make money on OnlyFans. It wasn't soft content, she said, toys, roleplay, control, the kind of stuff guys don't admit to watching in daylight. She didn't seem embarrassed, if anything she looked bored, like she'd told the story too many times to care how I'd react. It paid well, she added, better than anything else I've done, but eventually I got tired of being a fantasy for strangers. So she quit, switched to transcription work, something quiet and anonymous, her words. We began talking every night from midnight until sunrise. She showed up in that video chat like clockwork. We told each other stories and argued about classic horror movies. Leah adjusted the angle of her webcam and smirked. "You really think The Exorcist is just a demon possession flick?" I shrugged, grinning back. "Well, the spinny head was pretty impressive." She rolled her eyes. "Oh please, that's just showbiz. It's how they make the whole house feel like a creepy roommate who never pays rent." I laughed. "Great, so basically your worst nightmare." She smirked. "Exactly, always lurking, always judging your snack choices." I leaned into the camera, mock whispering. "Sounds like someone else I know." The smile turned sly. "Careful, or I'll start spinning my head too." Then, a few weeks later, she asked if she could visit me. I said yes, instantly. I mean, come on, why wouldn't I? We've been talking every night, I felt like I knew her. At least, that's what I told myself. It was Tuesday night, I'd finished dinner and collapsed on the couch, half watching YouTube, barely paying attention. The apartment had that weird kind of silence, the kind that makes you feel like you're underwater and the only sound is the radiator ticking in the corner. Then I heard it. Soft, like cloth brushing against the wall. I turned. Leah was standing in the middle of my apartment, barefoot, smiling like she belonged there, like this wasn't the first time. She was smiling like it was completely normal, like she'd been there 100 times before. I froze. For a second I thought perhaps I'd dozed off, that this was some half-lucid dream. When I blinked and sat up straight. "How did you get in?" was all I could manage. She tilted her head and gave me that same smile I remembered from our first video call. Warm, teasing, completely out of place. "You said I could come over, silly." Yeah, but the door was locked. She didn't answer. Instead, she walked over, curled up on the far end of the couch, tucked her legs beneath her and gave me this look, like she was waiting for me to relax. I should have pressed harder, asked her to leave, demanded answers. But I didn't. I wanted this so badly to make sense, even if it didn't. So I made myself believe I'd left the door unlocked. I tried convincing myself I'd just forgotten. I do that sometimes, you know? And she didn't seem dangerous. She looked exactly like she had on camera. Her presence felt familiar. It was even comforting. Try as I might to convince myself this was normal, I couldn't help but keep throwing side glances at the door while we talked. Couldn't help it. I kept running through the sequence in my head. I came home from a Chinese place and locked my deadbolt. I'm sure I locked it. And despite everything, despite the unease gnawing at me, I didn't ask again how she got in. She asked how my tech calls were going, joked about my mess in my kitchen, then somehow ended up doing my dishes. Afterward, she snuggled up next to me on the couch like we'd been living together for years. I know what you're thinking. I should have done things differently, but I was stupid for playing along. Maybe you're right. Maybe I knew deep down something was very wrong, but I laughed at her dumb jokes. I nodded when she talked, pretended it was normal, like it wasn't insane that she'd just appeared inside my locked apartment without a word. She stayed until almost 6, stretched like she'd just woken up, said she was tired. Leah kissed me gently and walked to the door like it was her place, like I was the visitor. I didn't follow her. I just sat there trying to make sense of it all. I never heard the door open or close, but when I checked, the bolt hadn't moved. That morning I couldn't sleep. I kept pacing and checked the windows, walked the building's perimeter. There were no missed back doors or fire escapes. There simply was no way out, or in, except the front door. My apartment's on the 3rd floor, and every window was locked tight from the inside. She came back the next night. Same time, same way. And just like before, I didn't ask questions, I just went along with it. We made pasta and cracked open a bottle of wine I'd been saving for a date that ghosted me. We watched old black and white horror films, grainy, eerie, with weird camera angles. She pointed at the screen and scoffed. See that? That's what makes Nosferatu actually terrifying. Not the makeup, not even the fangs, it's the shadows. The way Murnau frames himself like he's not even part of this world, like he's some sickness crawling through the house. I glanced at her. You mean like a virus? She nodded, eyes still on the screen. Exactly. He doesn't break into your home, he seeps into it. You don't notice he's infected everything until it's too late. I just nodded, half impressed, half wondering how she knew so much about early German cinema. When she left, the apartment felt empty in a way it hadn't before, like I'd grown used to a presence I never realised I needed. She never stayed past sunrise. Leah always left around 5:57, give or take a minute. Once I asked why she always left before 6. She smiled and said, "It's better this way." I didn't press the matter. During the day, she didn't exist. Her number didn't work. The messages she sent me at night would disappear from my phone by noon. I even screenshotted one once, only to find the image file corrupted when I checked it later. I tried asking people about her. A couple of friends and my neighbour downstairs, just in passing, trying to sound matter-of-factly. My neighbour said he hadn't seen anyone fitting her description go up to my apartment. My friends don't remember me mentioning her at all, which is, let's face it, odd. It seems like I would have told them about her. Rob, my closest friend, looked genuinely confused when I brought it up. "Dude, you've been single since Brooke moved out 2 years ago," he said. Pretty soon, Leah's silence during the day and the growing gap between my life at night and everything else started wearing on me. I stopped leaving the apartment unless I had to. My job made it easy and no one noticed. But me. I decided to set up a camera when I began waking up with long strands of Leah's hair twisted around my fingers, even though I hadn't remembered falling asleep beside her. It wasn't exactly paranoia, but more of a need to reassure myself. I needed to prove I wasn't imagining it all, or worse, going insane. I bought a decent infrared camera and positioned it across from my bed. I angled it slightly to the side so it wouldn't catch a direct face shot unless I sat up. I didn't tell Leah, of course. I wasn't sure how she'd react and I didn't want to scare her off, but who am I kidding? I was the one who was scared. Part of me still believes she was just an incredibly private person with a flair for theatrical eccentricities. The first night, the camera recorded 6 hours of footage. When I watched it the next morning, it caught nothing strange, just me sleeping alone. I tried again the next night, same deal, except this time the file had a gap. From 12:04 to 5:57, the footage was nothing but static, grey, white noise, like a broken signal. 5 hours just gone. The timestamps from the previous 2 nights were the same, so I checked the files again. Same thing. I lay awake that night, either from insomnia, which comes and goes, or from my mind doing mental gymnastics, trying to think of every reasonable explanation for the missing footage. So I sat in the dark, waiting for her to appear. She arrived at 12:06. She walked in from the kitchen like she'd been there all along. She flashed me that alluring smile and offered to make me tea. I didn't answer, I just stared, trying to focus on this strange woman in the dim light. "Hello, silly, are you awake?" she asked, still smiling. She repeated, "I'm about to fix myself some tea. Want some?" "Sure," I said. Then I asked if she knew about the camera. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she poured the tea, stirred in a little honey, and handed me the mug like nothing was wrong. Then she sat beside me, close and calm. I don't like being recorded. I hesitated. Why not? She looked straight at me with those soft, steady, unblinking eyes. Because if you try again, you might not wake up. She said it like she was reminding me to take out the trash. She wasn't angry, and her tone was not threatening. It was as if she was stating a fact. Then she kissed me gently on the side of my head and asked, almost sweetly, "So, what movie are we in the mood for tonight?" I didn't touch the camera again. Haven't recorded her since. After that night, things started changing. She stopped leaving at 5:57. Instead, she stayed a little longer each time. A minute, 2, then 5. It really began at 3 a.m. I woke to find her naked, lying beside me. I asked what she was doing there. I didn't remember going to bed, and I certainly would have remembered going to bed with her. She didn't answer, she just kissed me, slow and gentle. Then, without hesitation, she slid on top of me and guided my hands to her hips. We didn't speak. When it was over, she collapsed beside me, resting her head on my chest. I must have dozed off, because when I woke at 5:57, she was still there. She smiled and whispered, "You look so peaceful." Then she was gone, except for the faint smell of her shampoo on the sheets. Soon it wasn't just for timing. Leah still came after midnight and left around sunrise, but her schedule stopped making sense. Some nights she arrived at 12:10, other times closer to 1 a.m. One Thursday, just to give you an idea, I'd just finished brushing my teeth. It was about 5 minutes before midnight, around the time she usually showed up. I turned off the bathroom light and stepped into the hallway, and there she was, standing there, watching me, like she'd been there the whole time. She didn't say a word, she just smiled and walked past me into the living room. But her strange timing and silent entrances weren't the worst part. It was her footsteps. There were moments, late at night, when she'd cross the room and I'd hear absolutely nothing. No creak. There was no hint of weight on the floorboards that always groaned, even when you tiptoed. The silence was completely unnatural. It got more disturbing the longer we spent time together. Not just for subtle things like her footsteps, but other details that never added up. For example, she knew things about my childhood no one but my parents should have known. She mentioned the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles bedsheet I had when I was a kid, and how she thought it was so adorable it would be my favourite bed cover. And she was right, that was my favourite bedsheet. But I never told her that. In fact, I never told her anything about my childhood. Yet she said it like she had been there or something. She casually mentioned the names of people I haven't spoke to in years. One night we were watching a movie and she quoted a line from it before the characters said it. It was one of those really obscure lines, some throwaway bit of dialogue about a coffee machine. It wasn't anything well known like, "Frankly my dear, I don't give a damn." You know, something the average person might know. When I laughed and asked her how she knew, she just looked at me like she didn't understand the question. I learned not to push. In fact, I learned to stop asking her questions for the most part. Still, I began questioning myself, even my sanity. What is she? That question ran through my mind every moment I spent with her. 2 days ago, I tried to take a break from her. I went off grid, I turned off the phone, unplugged the router, packed a few clothes into a duffel bag and left the apartment. I drove around town looking for a place to stay until I wound up at a Travelodge parking lot. I checked in and didn't tell anyone where I was. When I got my keycard at the front desk, I went straight to my room. I shut the blinds, I turned on my TV and I sat on the edge of a bed, half expecting her to show up at midnight and half hoping she wouldn't. I opened the drawer beside the bed and found a Bible. Yeah, one of those complimentary Bibles you can find in most hotel rooms in the country, left there by a group called the Gideons. Though I was raised Catholic, I've never been a believer, but I found myself reading it just to kill time, waiting for midnight to pass. Before I knew it, it was 1 AM, and no Leah. I thought maybe my plan had worked, but distance mattered. That first night, I didn't feel her presence. I figured maybe I'd finally get some sleep without waking up to her beside me. As beautiful as she was, I'd begun to fear her. The second night was different. This time, she knocked. It was 12:07, soft at first, but measured enough to wake me from my light sleep. For a second, I thought maybe I was dreaming, or maybe it was some drunk guest looking for a friend. Then came a second knock, louder this time. I froze, holding my breath. By the fifth knock, I heard her voice through the door. "Nate, please open up. I know you're in there. You don't have to be scared of me. I love you. Just open the door." I didn't move. I just sat there in that cheap chair, hands clenched, my heart pounding like a drum. The knocking kept going, steady and patient, like she had all the time in the world. And after a few minutes it stopped, and didn't start again. I didn't sleep that night. I kept the lights on and propped the chair against the door like it would actually help, but it was all I had. That morning I went downstairs and asked the woman at the front desk if anyone had come by my room around midnight. She said no one had signed in or asked for me. But she did mention one strange thing. Right around that same time, the hallway camera outside my door glitched to static, just for a few minutes. When I came back to my apartment later that day, everything was exactly how I'd left it, except for one thing. The mug she always used was sitting on the counter. I don't think Leah's human. I suspected that almost from the first night she showed up. I don't know what she is, or how long she's been doing this, or how many people she's doing it to. I just know she's getting stronger. That night, I woke again at 3 AM with no memory of going to bed. She was beside me, naked, watching me like before. But even in the dark, I saw her smile was different. There was no warmth, none of the affection I'd come to expect. She didn't speak, just climbed on top of me, with no tenderness. This wasn't like before. It was rough, disconnected and mechanical, like she was using this moment to punish. It was like I wasn't a person anymore, just a thing. I didn't stop her, I didn't even move. When it ended, she didn't snuggle into me, she just lay there, eyes open, breathing steady. She was staring at the ceiling like she was waiting for something else to happen. I rolled onto my side, but I didn't sleep. I just listened to the radiator clicking in the corner and stared at the window, waiting for morning. Now she's staying longer. She's showing up earlier. She's learning more about me, more than anyone should be able to know. A part of me is terrified that if I try to leave again, she won't knock. She'll already be inside. I spent the next 2 days digging through that Insomnia forum where I first met Leah. Her username, midnight_sister, was gone. There was no post history, no deleted comments, there was nothing. It was like she'd never been there. But the original thread was still up. Anyone else feel like time changes after midnight? Most of the replies were junk, half asleep, stoner ramblings, weird movie analogies, people joking about time loops, but one stood out. A user called Archivist29 had replied almost a year before I joined. It does, especially if she's already found you. Leave now, don't let her in, no matter how much you think you love her. That was the only comment they ever posted. There was no profile picture and this person had no other post, but their bio had one thing in it. Archivist29@protonmail.com. I almost decided not to contact him, but that night Leah arrived at 11:56 PM. She didn't say anything, she just walked in and stood at the foot of my bed, watching me, and waiting. When I finally looked up and met her gaze, she smiled and said, "Don't you dare leave again." The next morning, I emailed Archivist29. I told him I needed to speak with him. I kept my message brief, just for basic details. I wrote that I thought I had met her too. He replied within an hour and agreed to meet in person. His name was Ren. Early 50s, sharp blue eyes with a slight tremor in his hands. He worked in a basement office below a private archive in Oberlin, Ohio. The office smelled like old paper and stale tobacco, with a faint trace of cedarwood and something musky I couldn't quite place. The office was silent except for a goldfish aquarium filter. He poured coffee into mismatched mugs, then lit a cigarette with a zipper. "I met Julia in '95, he said. Voice rough like gravel. Rancid show in Berkeley. She smiled at me like we'd known each other for a lifetime. I leaned forward, my heart skipping. Julia? Ren's laugh was short and humourless. She wasn't Leah back then, no. Sometimes goes by Julia, sometimes Adira. Soft names, like spells, to soothe her soul. He stubbed out a cigarette, fingers shaking as he crushed the ash. I noticed the fine lines around his eyes deepen. A man worn down by more than time. Why is she? Really? I asked with a voice barely above a whisper. Ren didn't answer right away. He stared down at his clasped hands, then lit another cigarette, inhaled deep, and blew a stream of smoke through his nostrils. She's not a ghost, he finally said. Ghosts get stuck, trapped in time, repeating the same moment. But she moves, shifts, bends to fit you. She feeds on the silence between your thoughts. His eyes glossed over for a moment, and I caught a glimpse of something raw. It was the look of loss, regret, a memory too heavy to hold. I lost myself, he said quietly. 6 months, I thought I was in love. Then 6 more, realising I couldn't remember my own brother's face, or my mother's voice, or my dad's name. She doesn't just haunt you, she takes pieces. She eats them whole. He pulled a worn notebook from a desk, fingers tracing the cover like it was the only thing left. This saved me, my only anchor. He slid it toward me. I wrote down everything, my name, my address, the songs I liked, people I loved, because I couldn't trust what was in my head anymore. She was rewriting me. I flipped through the pages slowly. Page after page contained names, dates, receipts, bits of lies glued down like evidence in case no one else believed existed. Then he said it. She's a succubus. I looked up, wondering to myself if I heard him correctly. Ren's eyes were fixed on mine, sharp and focused, as if he already knew what I was thinking. Not the kind you read about in dusty folklore or religious texts. This one has no wings, a tail or horns. She doesn't seduce you with lust. She uses love, intimacy, your own loneliness to manipulate. She reshapes herself into whatever hurts just right. My throat felt dry, and I could barely utter a few hesitant words that I struggled to spit out. But I thought succubi were... Ren cut me off. Demons? Maybe parasites? Definitely. She doesn't drain your body, she drains you. Your identity, your memory, your shape. I shifted in my seat, rubbing my hands together. But if she's not bound by walls or locks, then why don't she just show up in my hotel room? Why not? Ren gave a short, tired, unamused laugh. He took a drag of his cigarette, exhaled slowly and said, because she hadn't claimed that space yet. I frowned. Claimed? It roots itself in places. Grows inside them like black mould under the wallpaper. This creature needs time. It relies on repetition and emotion. Your apartment? That's hers now. You invited her. You fed her every night without knowing it. He tapped the table. But that hotel, it's cold and temporary. You have no history there. She doesn't have a foothold there. Not yet, anyway. And she doesn't like being shut out. That was a week ago. Since then, I filled 2 notebooks. Every detail I could think of, I wrote in there. Meals I've eaten, my first dog's name, weird dreams, the names of my old teachers, even the name of a girl I shared my first kiss with back in middle school. I've even written down the smell of my childhood bedroom and the exact layout of my grandmother's house, anything that might stick. I even tried to leave again. It was sometime just before dawn. I packed a small bag, wallet, charger, an old leather jacket, and no plan except a raw instinct to run. I made it to the front door. I twisted the knob. It didn't budge. I thought maybe it was jammed, but there was no resistance. It just wouldn't open. I felt her behind me before I turned. She was leaning against the wall, barefoot, wearing one of my shirts. "Where would you go?" she asked, like she honestly wanted to know. I didn't answer. I couldn't. She walked over, wrapped her arms around my waist and rested her chin on my shoulder. "You're safe here," she said. "You don't have to remember everything. Just stay with me." I don't remember unpacking. I don't remember going back to bed. But when I woke, just after 7 AM, my bag was gone, and she was still there.